Hey guys, welcome back to RPO Restorations. Today we'll be talking about the last engine designed and produced by Oldsmobile. This engine was also the first wholly domestic dual overhead cam 4-cylinder engine produced by General Motors. This engine was first released in 1988 and had a 14-year production run going all the way up to 2002. This engine gradually became a mainstay in GM's lineup, becoming the base engine across the majority of its passenger cars. GM's engineers fought a constant battle with noise, vibration, and harshness throughout production, resulting in multiple design changes during its run. This engine is the Oldsmobile Quad 4. The Quad 4 engine debuted for the 1988 model year in the Cutlass Calais. It displaced 2.3 liters and had a 9.5 to 1 compression ratio with a bore of 3.62 inches and a stroke of 3.35 inches. It produced 150 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque. It was able to do this without the use of an EGR valve and was still able to meet emission standards. GM designated this the LD2 version of the engine. It featured a cast iron block and an aluminum cylinder head, which was fairly modern for a regular production engine of the time. It did, however, continue to use a timing chain, which also turned the water pump. At this point, most manufacturers were phasing out the use of chains in favor of belts. It also used sequential port fuel injection, which definitely helped with emissions. It eventually saw service with most of GM's car lineup and was also used as the base engine on 1990 and 1991 Cutlass Supremes and Pontiac Grand Prix. Its output was increased in 1990 to 160 horsepower. In 1995, the engine saw its first major upgrade with the addition of a balance shaft for smoother operation. This necessitated a reduction in the red line from 6,800 RPMs to 6,500. Horsepower was reduced to 150. This engine was produced for 1 year only until the introduction of the LD9 version in 1996. Before we get to the LD9 version, we have to stop and talk about the high-performance version of the Quad 4, which was introduced in 1989. The LG0 version debuted in the Cutlass International Series and the Pontiac Grand Am SE. It featured a more aggressive camshaft and higher 10-to-1 compression ratio, requiring the use of premium fuel. It was only available with a 5-speed manual transmission. This engine eventually was offered in several cars in Oldsmobile's lineup, including the Quad 442 and several International Series models. It was also offered in several Pontiac Grand Am models and was used in the Chevrolet Beretta GTU from 1990 to 1993. It was last offered in the Chevy Beretta Z26 and the Oldsmobile Achieva ASC in 1994 before production engine. It actually held the title as GM's most powerful naturally aspirated production 4-cylinder engine until 2010, when GM introduced the 2.4-liter Ecotec engine. The highest performance variant of the Quad 4 was the W41 version. This engine had a 3-year run and was first offered in the 1991 Cutlass Calais. It was rated at 190 horsepower. It featured an even longer duration camshaft and upgraded PROM chip in the engine's computer. It was also offered in the 1992 and 3 Oldsmobile Achieva SCX. In 1992, with the scheduled sunset of Pontiac's Iron Duke 4-cylinder, GM introduced the L40 version of the Quad 4 to replace it. This engine featured a single overhead cam and produced 120 horsepower and 140 pound-feet of torque. Production lasted just 2 years when GM dropped it in favor of the dual cam version. It was used in the 1992 through 1994 Oldsmobile Achieva, Pontiac Grand Am, and Buick Skylark. In 1996, GM released the final variant of the Quad 4, the LD9 version. Displacement was increased from 2.3 liters to 2.4 liters. Bore was reduced to 3.54 inches and stroke was increased to 3.7 inches to improve low-end torque. Compression was 9.5 to 1. It was rated at 150 horsepower. In 1999, compression was increased to 9.7 to 1, and in 2001, the engine received several updates, including flat top pistons, a stronger timing chain, and a redesigned water pump. Production of the Quad 4 ended after the 2002 model year. As someone who owned a Quad 4 in its 1995 iteration, I can honestly say it was a pretty peppy 4-cylinder engine. The cars it was pulling were fairly light and it had good pickup. It was less noisy than the Iron Duke which came before it, but by the early 90s, it was rough sounding compared to most of the imports. And before I get chewed up in the comments, yes, the Cosworth Vegas dual overhead cam 4 was produced by GM, but the heads were designed by Cosworth in England, and the late Oldsmobile engines were based on Cadillac architecture. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Oldsmobile Quad 4. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'll see you on the next one.